This is an ITG special presentation.
On this edition of In the Gun, we dive into the numbers. 3 decades of carving up defenses has produced some pretty crazy stats. We pop the hood on the metrics and the trends forged by Coach Rod's offense on this episode of ITG.
Kind of a football junkie. I try to learn something every day.
This play is a classic zone read out of a spread formation.
This offense, the origination of it was actually the run and shoot.
You fly around and play fast.
His passer rating set an NCAA record.
I'll show you who's in command. Woody Densler.
To try to stretch the field both horizontally and vertically.
Slayton inside the 20. He's gone. Touchdown, West Virginia.
You'll be mentally and physically tougher than anybody you play, or you won't be playing.
Leaps for the touchdown. The nation's leading rusher.
That's tempo in the run game. That's Rich Rodriguez.
To the house. And last, and most importantly, be physical. Be physical.
It was kind of unique when I was talking to Rand about that, and they're looking at the Big 12. I'm like, I'm more familiar with these teams than maybe any other league because of my time in the Pac-12. You're talking about Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, even played BYU a couple times. So I probably know those programs, know those regions, know how they recruit, or at least how they've recruited in the past more than any other league.
Rich Rodriguez has actually faced half of the current 16 Big 12 members and 8 of the 12 teams on West Virginia's 2025 schedule. But we'll flesh all that out in a minute. Welcome to it, folks. I'm Jed Drenning, and you are In the Gun. This episode of ITG is brought to you by Bet Online. The game starts here. Before we get rolling, I do want to give a quick thanks to all of you who have joined us in this 5-part series on Coach Rod's spread offense. In the first 4 installments, we covered everything from the system's run-and-shoot genesis and some early growing pains to Coach Rod's pivot into the ground game and even a little trickeration for good measure. I hope you guys had as much fun with that last one as I did. Few things get me more fired up than talking about how fundamentally American the spread offense really is. But now, it's time to unleash my inner stat geek.
Nerd alert!
I know, I get it. Statistics have always had something of an image problem. Many folks will hear the word and jump up right away and tell you Mark Twain said there are lies, damn lies, in statistics. Well, the truth is, Mark Twain didn't actually say that first. He attributed that quote to Benjamin Disraeli, our British Prime Minister. Now, I'll be the first to admit, I didn't realize that until I was preparing for this show. The statistics on how many people do actually know that without cheating like I did might be pretty interesting. What is it, 2%, 5%, 15%? Whatever it is, I assume it's not many people, but if you're interested in a more exact answer to maybe compare it to something else, that's where statistics would enter the conversation. But of all the slap-in-the-face quotes about stats, and trust me, there are plenty to choose from, my favorite might actually be from Andrew Lang, who said he uses statistics as a drunken man uses lampposts, for support rather than illumination. As zingers go, that's a pretty good one. But the truth is, I don't spend time dwelling on what statistics aren't and can't do, because that's a long list. Instead, I focus more on what they are capable of. From a fan's perspective, at their best, statistics and numbers can foster a deeper understanding of achievement within the game. Instead of Cal Ripken Jr. being remembered as a guy who seemed to hardly ever take a day off, statistics remove all doubt and firmly establish him as the all-time record holder for consecutive Major League games played. In Hershey, PA in 1962, when the Warriors outgunned the Knicks, fans no doubt left the arena that night saying it seemed like Wilt Chamberlain was unstoppable. Well, statistics reveal that wasn't just another of many dominant performances by an NBA player, But instead, it was the night Chamberlain became the only player in the history of the league to score 100 points. That statistic makes for an even more compelling story for anyone in attendance that night. I'm sure that for the rest of their lives, every time that 100 points stat comes up in a broadcast or in a trivia game or even a conversation at the barbershop, they remind anyone in earshot that they were there that night. Look, emotion and memories are what make sports special. And honestly, there's really no close second. Statistics, meanwhile, are the tapestry that lends perspective to it. If you were at the 2005 Louisville game in Morgantown with your dad or someone else close, you'll always remember who you shared that special memory with the night WVU came from way behind in the fourth quarter to win. You'll remember the big moments and the big hits, or maybe the time your buddy pointed out that a Mountaineer was barely crawling back to his feet after one play, and then the two of you watched him do something incredible against the Cardinals on the next. These are the things numbers don't measure, and they're more than enough to make the game one of life's truly golden treasures. But that's the beauty of college football. You don't have to stop there. You'll also remember who you watched Steve Slayton score 6 touchdowns with that night. Sure, there have been games when other Mountaineers scored 4 or even 5 TDs, but that night, Super Steve scored more than any other player in WVU history. And you know that because of statistics. It adds even more color to the story you tell with a giant smile on your face for years after the fact. You'll always remember who you were with the night Steve Slayton did that. All of this has its place, but I think you get the point. If you're a fan of out-in-the-weeds analytics, this episode is right in your wheelhouse.
Using the stats the way we read them, we'll find value in players that nobody else can see.
But if you're not a stat geek, don't worry. Buckle up and pop a Dramamine because we still think you'll have a lot of fun too as we share with you not just some of the more impressive numbers this system has produced over the decades and all the way up through last season at Jacksonville State, but also a couple pretty interesting patterns Coach Rod's offenses have established or followed through the years. So, let me hop off my soapbox and get started by taking a look at Rich's track record versus the teams that currently constitute the 16-member Big 12 Conference. If you want to frame a reference as to how Rich's squads have historically done in league competition, well, in 3 years at Jacksonville State, Coach Rod's Gamecocks went 18-2 in conference play. During his first run at West Virginia, Coach Rod won 71% of his league games back when the Mountaineers were a member of the Big East. He posted an impressive 34-14 record in 7 years against conference counterparts, and 6 of those 14 losses came in his first season. But Old Big East wins hold less value than company script in WVU's more recent landing spot, the Big 12. So, how has Rich fared in his various stops as a head coach through the years against the teams now populating the Mountaineers' current conference home? As mentioned earlier, as a head coach, Rich has faced 8 of the 16 members of the Big 12. Most of these games, of course, took place during Coach Rod's 6 years at Arizona. Overall, his teams have put together a record of 18-11 against current Big 12 programs. Let's take a look. As the Arizona head coach, Rich struggled in 6 matchups against his former assistant, Todd Graham's Sun Devils, posting a 2-4 mark against Arizona State in the battle for the Territorial Cup. But one of those wins was a big one against a ranked Arizona State team in 2014 to help Arizona prevail as Pac-12 South Division champs. Rich's Wildcats lost to Brigham Young in a neutral site season opener in 2016. Officially, that's the only time he's faced the Cougars as a head coach, but this one kind of needs an asterisk. When Tommy Bowden left Tulane to take the Clemson job in 1998, Rich, as the Green Wave's offensive coordinator, not an interim head coach, stayed behind to help coach the team in the Liberty Bowl against BYU. Chris Selfo had recently been named Tulane's new head coach, despite the fact Selfo had only recently arrived on campus. He was technically at the helm of the Green Wave in the bowl game. though it was Rich who the players carried off the field like a conquering hero after beating the Cougars 41-27. At West Virginia, Rich's teams played Cincinnati 5 times, winning 4 of them, including Coach Rod's first road win as head coach of the Mountaineers, a 35-32 thriller at Nippert in 2002. WVU actually faced 3 different Bearcats head coaches in those 5 games: Rick Minter, Mark D'Antonio, and Brian Kelly. Coach Rod's teams have historically had their way with Colorado. His Wildcats knocked off the Buffaloes 5 times in 6 tries when he was in Tucson, averaging more than 40 points and nearly 350 rushing yards per contest in those 6 games. Rich lost by a field goal in his only game against Houston, which came in the 2017 opener, and his Wildcats took down a top 20 Mike Gundy-coached Oklahoma State team in 2012, upending the Cowboys 59-38, the only time he ever faced the Pokes. Coach Rod has twice faced UCF, and both those matchups actually came during his first run at West Virginia as the Mountaineers toppled the Knights convincingly in consecutive years, 2003 and 2004. 7 times Coach Rod has faced Utah, including 6 times with Arizona and once at Michigan. His teams have posted a 4-3 record against the Utes, including a win over a top 10 Utah team in 2015. While we're at it, let's go ahead and take a look at what kind of record Rich has posted against the teams populating West Virginia's 2025 schedule. West Virginia's Week 2 trip to Athens to square off against the defending MAC champs will mark the 2nd time Rich has faced Ohio University. His very first win at West Virginia came against the Bobcats back in 2001, the only other time he coached against them. And he obviously has plenty of familiarity with Pitt, winning 4 times in 7 tries against the Panthers. September 13th will mark his first game against a Pat Narduzzi-coached Pitt team, though the two have game planned against one another multiple times before when Rich was at Michigan and Narduzzi was the defensive coordinator at Michigan State. And yes, believe it or not, Narduzzi was just as insufferable back then as he is now. Speaking of which, this is a good time to remind you that if you're a fan of the show and throw up in your mouth just a little like we do every time you hear Pat Narduzzi speak, do us a big solid and hit the like button and subscribe. Doing so really scratches that YouTube algorithm where it itches and helps out the show in a major way.
Don't cost nothing.
And of course, we ask you to remember to do business with those who do business with us here at ITG. That, of course, includes J.R. Toothman and his fine folks at Toothman Ford in Grafton. We're reminded at every turn what an incredible and generous member of the West Virginia community Toothman Ford really is, and we all know that cars cost less in Grafton. Also, a big thanks to our man Rick Lewis and his band of renowned folks over at Fortis. For roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed, be sure to visit fortis.us.com. And a big thank you to Tim Johnston and his talented crew at Johnston Equipment. You can visit them on Route 33 between Weston and Buchanan or online at johnstoneq.com. That's Johnston with a T, EQ.com. One of the most recognizable signatures of Coach Rod's offense since it was first installed all those years ago has been tempo. From Glenville State to Morgantown and everywhere between, his offenses have always been the aggressor.
Every day I think about how can we go faster.
The benefits to this high-speed approach are many. By limiting a defense's ability to substitute, not only is an offense confronted with fewer specialty sub-packages, but they force a premium on conditioning, even early in the game. And every team Rich has ever coached has prided itself in being the best conditioned group on the field. This fact renders tempo one of his most lethal weapons. Vince Lombardi's Packers were known to have a sign hanging in their locker room that read, "Fatigue makes cowards of us all." You might have even heard years later Jimmy Johnson say it. Well, the truth is, it was actually written years ago in a message from General George Patton to his troops during World War II. But irrespective of who said it first, truer words you might not ever hear. When a defense gets tired, when you start seeing hands on hips and players gasping for air, poor technique isn't far downstream. Form tackling disintegrates, and it doesn't matter what point in the game this happens. Eventually, when you overwhelm a defense with tempo, ball carriers start running through arm tackles like pool noodles. Stiff arms and lowered shoulders become more effective. 3-yard gains turn into 5-yard gains, 7-yard gains turn into 10-yard gains, and 10-yard gains turn into touchdowns.
3 left here in the fourth quarter. Pat White has exploded for a miraculous touchdown run. He went this way, that way, and back the other way.
Rich understands this and specifically tailors not just his pedal-to-the-floor offense to capitalize on it, but his entire off-season conditioning program.
The core of what we're doing, the tempo part of it, I still think is a non-negotiable. We're going to do that. I think it's the most overlooked factor in football is conditioning, and we want to make it a factor in every game.
For many defenses, trying to hold up against this pace for the balance of 60 minutes is a fool's errand. It's no accident that Jack State led Conference USA with a chunky 5.7 yards per carry average in the fourth quarter. It's not at all uncommon to see Rich's offenses doing that. This is his not-so-secret sauce. But it's not speed just for the sake of speed. It's speed in service of winning football games. When Coach Rod's teams get a lead down the stretch, you'll see them throttle down to take the wind out of the game and close the deal.
We want to do that as fast as we can for 3 quarters. If we have a 2-score lead in the fourth quarter, then we're going to milk it and take the clock down and win the game.
The numbers reflect Rich's point. Look at how he manipulated tempo at Jack State last year to win Conference USA. Overall, according to TeamRankings.com, the Gamecocks were the 11th fastest offense in college football, averaging 1 play every 23.2 seconds. But in reality, Jack State typically operated at an even faster pace than that average suggests, as their seconds per play overall was inflated by the fact that when Jack State got a lead in the fourth quarter, just as you heard Rich talking about there, they circled the wagons and slowed the pace to choke out the clock, consuming, in those situations, more than 37 seconds of game time per play. In the first 30 minutes of games, no offense in Conference USA moved faster than Coach Rod's Gamecocks, averaging 37 plays run per first half played. But in large part because of having so many late leads, in the final 15 minutes, Jack State pumped the brakes with regularity, slowing all the way down to an average of just 15 snaps per fourth quarter, the fewest in Conference USA. When Rich has a lead in the fourth quarter, don't expect him to start getting cute. He never has. Jacksonville State threw the football just 58 times in the fourth quarter all year, far less than any other team in Conference USA. In fact, in 5 games, the Gamecocks didn't throw a single pass in the fourth quarter. Again, this was owing in large measure to so many large leads. It was also a big reason Jack State was one of only 9 teams in the country to not throw a single interception in the fourth quarter all season. Believe it or not, Coach Rod's Gamecocks were one of only 3 teams in college football, Big 12 champ Arizona State and national champ Ohio State being the others, to not commit a turnover of any kind in the fourth quarter all year. It might have snuck up on you, but the actual playing time of college football games, not to be confused with commercial and ad time, has slowly become more compressed in recent years. Rule changes impacting the clock have resulted in fewer offensive snaps per game on average, which of course has translated to fewer offensive possessions per game on average. BCFtoys.com, great website if you're not familiar. They did a deep dive into this topic in February, studying the distribution of possession counts per game during an 18-season span from 2007 through last year. So, really solid sample size. Their research indicated that the number of offensive possessions in a game have indeed gradually diminished over time. When they looked at the games with the fewest possessions in the last 18 years, half of them came in the last 5 seasons, so recently. Conversely, when they listed the games since 2007 with the most combined offensive possessions, only 1 of the top 7 came in the last 8 years, and none in the last 2 years. you see where this trend is going. Moral of the story, never in the modern era of college football has there been a greater premium on every possession your offense gets than there is right now. This has contributed to a recent surge in fourth down attempts from all over the field. Driven in part by analytics, more coaches, now than ever, roll the dice on fourth down, hoping to extend those precious possessions. The numbers bear out how the game has changed here. As recently as 2017, just 28 teams across the country went for it on fourth down 25 or more times. So think about that. 2017, 28 total teams attempted at least 25 fourth downs. Just last year, that number had more than doubled to 57 teams. More coaches are rolling the dice. For those wondering, Coach Rod's Jack State Gamecocks weren't one of those 57 teams. JSU attempted 24 fourth downs all season, converting 54% of them. Throwing a lot of numbers at you here, but we're working our way toward a point. Rich's approach to this is dictated less by analytics than by a basic philosophy on field position. As he sees it, once you breach the opponent's 40-yard line and are operating in plus territory, it's more than worth the gamble.
It's more of a feel for me, but again, I'm always like, those possessions are so valuable that you hate to give one up if it's crossed midfield and it's fourth and short. So we'll probably go for it. I don't think I've ever if I ever punt inside the 40-yard line going in on a normal down and distance, check my pulse because I probably passed out on the sidelines or something. I mean, we're going to go for it 100% of the time, inside the 40.
Now, you know from watching the first 4 episodes in the series that many parts of what Rich does offensively have evolved over the arc of time. But this isn't one of them. I remember going for it on a 4th and 18 from the West Virginia Wesleyan 38-yard line on our opening series of the game all the way back in 1991, the year we first installed this offense at Glenville State. After an incompletion on 3rd and long, I turned to trot off the field figuring to see the punt team come on. Instead, I saw Rich waving us back out and signaling in our go package out of 4 wides, our rip look. It was twins to each side with all 4 receivers going vertical, and I thought, oh, okay, I guess we're doing this. So we lined up and we got the snap off so fast that it kind of felt like the secondary was still trying to sort things out. Wesleyan was in some kind of too high shell, but when our stud slot receiver pushed deep and bent inside the safety over top of him, it drew the attention of the backside half player who reacted by drifting to the middle of the field in his back pedal. Well, I kind of fixed my eyes play side for just a beat to encourage that DB to keep drifting in that direction. Then I turned and targeted our backside slot who was screaming up the seam. That slot just jumped up and snatched the ball inside the 15-yard line. Suddenly, first down. The whole sequence kind of unfolded in a flash, and you could see in the defense's eyes what a gut punch that conversion was to them. But that was hardly the most memorable example of Rich rolling the dice on a fourth down situation inside the 40 in his career. Through the years, there have been plenty, including some pretty significant ones that Mountaineer fans might remember, like a certain 4th and 4 from the Pitt 37 in the final minute of the first half of the 2003 backyard brawl.
And Marshall takes the snap. He drops back, has time, fires the ball deep downfield for Pennington. There's contact, pass is hauled in, and it is caught. Touchdown! John Pennington hauled in a touchdown from 28 yards away. And folks, it is all tied up.
Even in the NFL, featuring the most talented specialists in the world, punting from inside the 40 far more often than not ends up in a touchback, believe it or not. Considering that the offense will be given possession at its 25-yard line after said touchback, you really don't gain much from the sequence when that happens. As such, the payoff of taking a measured gamble under these circumstances and from this part of the field, which Rich almost invariably does, would seem a pretty reasonable wager. Coach Rod's offensive system has obviously contributed to a whole lot of wins through the years, 232 in all, as a head coach and coordinator at all levels. Along the way, it's posted numbers that would be the envy of most video games. As a play caller, Rich has coached offenses that have thrown for 500-plus yards 4 times. He's also coached offenses that have rushed for 500-plus yards 6 times. Many coaches go an entire career without producing an offense that does either of those things even once. Directing Rich's offense at West Virginia in a 2006 blowout victory in the Backyard Brawl, Pat White became the first Mountaineer in history to throw for 200 yards and rush for 200 yards in the same game, a performance that gifted the world with the Pats meow.
Now, he actually injured it last season. He thought he could play with it this year, but what the trainers told me is he re-injured it this year, and now he's going to have to get it taken care of.
Yeah, I talked to him last night. He said it is a concern. You know, you have to have in your head, Kirk, you got to change hands with the football.
One of my favorite parts of that whole sequence might be, it's kind of hard to hear over top of the conversation between Aaron Andrews and Chris Fowler on the broadcast, but 3 spots up from Pat on the bench is Owen. And if you listen closely, right there at the end, you see Owen lean in, and he actually asks Pat, "Dude, are you all right?" But you have to listen real close.
I talked to him last night. He said it is a concern. You know, you have to have in your head, Kirk, you got to.
Anyway, 4 years later, as the centerpiece of Rich Rod's 2010 Michigan offense, Denard Robinson became the first player in the history of college football to achieve that feat twice, running for 258 yards and throwing for 244 in a win at Notre Dame, and going 200 again in a win over Indiana. Then there was his first playmaker at Arizona. In its heyday, the Pac-12 Conference produced some of the greatest runners to ever play the game, from Charles White and Marcus Allen to Christian McCaffrey and Reggie Bush. The league enjoyed more than its share of playmakers, Heisman winners, and Pro Football Hall of Famers. But none of those stalwarts own the single-game Pac-12 rushing record. That distinction belongs to a 5'10", 196-pound spark plug you probably never heard of. Tucson-born Kadeem Carey was the homegrown bell cow of Coach Rod's 2012 Wildcats offense. And in a blowout win over Colorado that year, Carey ran wild, eclipsing a single-game Pac-12 record that had stood for 28 years by gashing the Buffaloes for 366 rushing yards. For good measure, he also scored 5 touchdowns to tie another Pac-12 mark. But Mountaineer fans know that isn't the only 300-yard rushing performance by a running back in Rich's system. In the 2004 season opener, West Virginia's K.J. Harris helped the Mountaineers upend East Carolina by racking up 337 yards to establish a new single-game Big East record, breaking the previous mark held by Miami's Edgerrin James. Along the way, K.J. Harris enabled West Virginia to make quick work of the Pirates, setting new WVU school records for yards rushing in a half with 223 and yards rushing in a quarter with 168. For years, running backs have flourished in this offense. 8 times, players in this scheme have finished the season in the top 10 in the country in rushing. The record-setting single-game outings by Carey and Harris top the statistical list, but the number of big performances by running backs playing in Coach Rod's system is a lot longer than that. According to my unofficial JED math, 15 times running backs in this offense have broken the 200-yard threshold in a game, including 3 times by Trey Stewart last year at Jack State. The list includes 8 different players at 3 different schools. Avon Coburn churned out 210 yards in the first half of his 260-yard effort against East Carolina in 2002 and broke the WVU career rushing record in the third quarter of that game. When Steve Slayton shredded Pitt with 215 yards in the 2006 Backyard Brawl, he added another 130 yards receiving on the night for good measure. For those scoring at home, the fewest rush attempts in a game by a back to make this list of 200 yards or more was 20 carries by Nick Wilson of Arizona in 2014 when he ran for 218 yards against Utah in Salt Lake City. The most rushing attempts in a game by anyone on this list was Kadeem Carey in 2013 when he set an Arizona school record with 48 rush attempts on his way to picking up 206 yards in a win over fifth-ranked Oregon. But if you know anything about Coach Rod's offense the last couple of decades, you realize that the running backs don't go it alone when it comes to the ground game, as the quarterback is activated to make plays with his legs as well. So, if you want to go ahead and complete the set by taking a look at the quarterbacks in this offense who have eclipsed the 200-yard mark in a game, here we go. It's happened 10 times. But again, we're going by Jed's math on a napkin here, so these numbers aren't necessarily official. The 10 different 200-yard rushing performances have been achieved by 5 different quarterbacks at 5 different schools in 5 different conferences. One surprising absence from this list is Tyler Huff, Rich's trigger man at Jack State last year. The Gamecocks quarterback ran for over 1,300 yards, but didn't register a 200-yard game. Huff did have 4 games with over 150 yards with a season high of 177, but as I said, never hit the 200-yard mark. Rich's requirement for his quarterbacks is that they must be willing runners. Oftentimes, that willingness can lead to something special. Never has that been more true than in 2017 when Arizona visited Folsom Field in Boulder, Colorado. Starting quarterback Brandon Dawkins left the game after suffering a late hit on the opening drive. Off the bench came backup Khalil Tate. All he did was set a new single-game college football record for rushing yards by a quarterback with 327, and he did it while averaging an absurd 23 yards per carry. Tate added an by the way, 12 for 13 passing performance to his unprecedented night on the ground to lead the Wildcats to the win. Remember, he didn't even start this game. Colorado had no answer for Tate, barely laying a finger on him all night. Asked if he was tackled at all after the game by the media, Tate replied with a smile, "A couple times."
Will Tate's performance tonight?
Well, he was phenomenal. You know, he was. I could tell all week he was really wanting an opportunity and a chance, and I was really proud. Obviously, the way he ran the football, but his composure. When he got in there, his game management. He's seeing the field.
Yards rushing performance, was that as good as you've seen?
It was close. I've had some, with Denard Robinson and Patrick White. I've been blessed to have some really athletic quarterbacks that could run.
And there are those names again, Denard and Patrick, 2 names that will keep coming up in this episode, and 2 names that are littered throughout that list of 200-yard rushing performances forged with Rich Rodriguez as a play caller. And here's one that's fun to remember. When Pat White ran for 220 yards and the Mountaineers toppled Pitt in the 2006 brawl in Pittsburgh, Steve Slayton also ran for 200-plus against the Panthers. Now, why is that significant? Well, that was one of just 8 times in the long history of college football that a pair of teammates have achieved that feat, 200-plus rush yards each. The funny thing is, Coach Rod's squad came within 2 yards of doing it another time. In the Mountaineers' 2002 win over East Carolina, when Avon Coburn churned out 260 yards, Quincy Wilson erupted for 198 yards in the same game on just 14 carries, just a whisker away from another one of those unicorn rare 200 games. 2 flippin' yards from doing it twice. So close you can taste it. And in keeping with the spirit of obscure factoids, here's another one to throw on the pile for no real reason. We've established that only 8 times in history have college football teammates run for 200-plus yards in the same game. Well, not only was one of those rare 8 produced by West Virginia, as we just discussed, but I was actually in attendance one of the other 7 times it happened. In East Lansing, Michigan in 1997, when Nick Saban's Michigan State Spartans took Penn State behind the woodshed for a 49-14 whooping. Sparty's Cedric Irvin and Mark Renaud both eclipsed the 200-yard rushing mark. Hey, I warned you it was obscure, but stick around because we have plenty more to cover. On the other side of this quick break, we're going to dive into Coach Rod's teams and turnover margins, some numbers that'll open your eyes there, rushing advantages, also some pretty cool stuff, history-making quarterbacks, we're going to talk about them some more, and a small college receiver who did things under Coach Rod that the game had never seen. And to tease that out a bit more, how about we let the inimitable Dan Patrick take us into the break? You are in the gun.
The big show menu. Boston's Celtic pride is wounded following a weekend defeat. How would they respond against Minnesota? And our wrap-up from the college gridiron, we unearth some record breakers next.
Nobody supports the blue and gold Mountaineers like Toothman Ford. With over 20 NIL deals and counting, Toothman Ford continues to rally behind our student athletes. And it's time we rally and support the dealer that supports the Mountaineers. Not only does Toothman Ford offer the best prices in the state on pre-owned, their never over MSRP campaign on new Fords guaranteed to save you thousands. Drive with pride all season long, knowing you're supporting the dealer that fuels our Mountaineers. Toothman Ford, where cars cost less, in Grafton and at toothmanford.com.
At Coyote, we're going to treat you like dirt because we hold dirt in the highest regard. We're honored to find it under our fingernails. It keeps us humble, honest. If you know us, you know getting treated like dirt means getting treated with respect. Coyote, we dig dirt.
Now at Johnston Equipment, get 0% financing or a free loader with low-rate financing on select Coyote models in stock.
Come check out our new Coyotes at Johnston Equipment.
You're listening to Mountaineer Football Talk.
ITG.
For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
ITG.
Drew Solomon set a record tonight for pass attempts at the University of Arizona.
Solomon takes the snap, steps back to throw, rolls to the right, looking downfield, is going to heave it towards the end zone. Near the back of the end zone, the ball is knocked away, or is it caught? It is caught! I don't believe it! Touchdown, Arizona! Arizona's just won the game! The Cats have won it on the final play!
Believe it or not, the most passes ever attempted in a game by a Coach Rod offense didn't come during his pass-happy days in Glenville. Instead, it came in the desert in 2014 when Arizona's Anu Solomon put the football in the air 73 times against Cal. And it took all 73 as Solomon's final throw of the night was a 47-yard Hail Mary hauled in by Austin Hill on the buzzer to knock off the Golden Bears. The touchdown was part of a miraculous 36-point fourth quarter that helped the Wildcats overcome a 22-point deficit from earlier in the game. Just 3 weeks later, Anu Solomon nearly did it again, throwing the football 72 times when Arizona hosted the USC Trojans. For those wondering, the most pass attempts by a wide margin thrown by a Mountaineer quarterback during Rich's time at WVU was 52 by Brad Lewis at Maryland in a 2001 loss to the Terps. That was a pretty extreme outlier, though, as his offenses overall at West Virginia averaged just 21 pass attempts per game in his 7 years. And more recently, the most passes his Gamecocks attempted during his 3 years at Jack State, 40 in a win over Western Kentucky 2 years ago. That's also pretty high, as his Jack State offenses in 3 years averaged 23 pass attempts per game. What about the most team rushing attempts in a game by a Coach Rod offense? Well, his teams have been in the 60s in attempts multiple times, but the bar is 69 attempts by Arizona in a 2013 win over UNLV. It might not surprise you that Coach Rod's system has produced 19 different 1,000-yard rushing seasons, 13 by running backs and 6 by quarterbacks. But you want to guess which school featured the first of those 1,000-yard rushers? Glenville State. Sure, we might have been chucking it all over the yard in the Ville, but some pretense of balance mattered even back then. And in 1993, the same year we threw for over 4,000 yards, Shane Haddix cruised past the 1,000-yard rushing threshold and kept going, finishing the year with over 1,300 yards on the ground. Shane proved to be the first of multiple 1,000-yard rushers to play in Rich's offense at Glenville. From Rashid and Quincy to Pat and Steve, Rich's offense has long been known for explosive quarterback-running back combos, and that tradition continued last year at Jack State with Tyler Huff and Trey Stewart, as the pair actually made FBS history. Yes, they were a model of consistency for the 2024 Gamecocks, combining to account for nearly 5,500 yards and 55 touchdowns. But along the way, they became the first quarterback-running back tandem in the history of major college football to each rush for 1,300-plus yards and 15 or more touchdowns. Boy, those two cats at Jack State were unstoppable last year. But Rich has obviously coached a ton of guys who have done some incredible things on the offensive side of the football. That's well documented. But I submit to anyone who's watching or listening, depending on your podcast platform of choice, that a compelling case can be made that the most impressive body of work among all Rich's offensive studs might have been Chris George, my teammate at Glenville State. Chris lapped the competition like few people who have ever played the game.
Steps up, throws long, he's got a man open. George into the end zone for the touchdown! Woo-hoo!
In large part because of the flawed and incredibly imperfect voting process used by the College Football Hall of Fame, Chris hasn't been inducted, though he's been nominated multiple times. Every time his name comes up in that conversation, my response is the same. Based on the sheer magnitude by which he dominated his position at his level of football for 4 years, if Chris George isn't in the College Football Hall of Fame, there shouldn't be a College Football Hall of Fame. The hardware for Chris is all there. He's in the Glenville State Hall of Fame. In fact, alongside Rich, Chris was part of the first class ever inducted, as he should have been. 4 times he was all-conference for Coach Rod. 3 times he earned All-American honors. He was the Conference Player of the Year and won the prestigious Hardman Award, given to the state's top amateur athlete. He joined previous winners ranging from Joe Stidehar and Jerry West to Mary Lou Retton and Major Harris. And those of us who played with him can guarantee that Chris George belonged with names like that. But all these awards and honors were downstream from some of the craziest numbers you've ever seen a guy put up. In fact, Chris's light burned so brightly in the under-the-radar world of small college football that even the worldwide leader finally had to take notice.
College football has a new king of wide receivers. Chris George of NAIA's top-ranked Glenville State became college football's all-time pass catcher with 12 receptions against California University of Pennsylvania. George is trying to improve on a monster 93 campaign, which saw him pull down 144 passes for more than 2,000 yards. By the way, the old record was held by an obscure Mississippi Valley State wideout named Jerry Rice.
Now, here's an all-time rabbit hole for you. The eye-popping numbers Jerry Rice put up at Mississippi Valley State, which we'll get into here in a minute, were part of head coach Archie Cooley's pass-happy Satellite Express offense. Rice's quarterback was Willie Totten, a record setter himself who went on to play arena ball with the Chicago Bruisers. I bring this up because his teammate in the QB room in Chicago, Jimbo Fisher. Yep, that Jimbo Fisher, fresh off National Player of the Year honors at Samford, playing for Terry Bowden. I remember watching Bruisers games on ESPN the summer I was heading to Birmingham to start my freshman year at Samford, hoping to see Jimbo get in the game so I could bring it up to him when he was coaching us. At any rate, if you can be so kind as to follow me all the way back to the topic at hand, Chris George's production was off the charts. After eclipsing the all-time mark by Jerry Rice in Glenville State's season opener his senior year, every catch Chris made in the final 10 games of his career was literally a new record. Week after week, with every team on our schedule selling their soul to contain Chris, Rich continued to create ways to feed him, and Chris always responded, gashing every defense we faced, torching them with 10 to 15 grabs and big play after big play. He once caught 23 passes in a single game, still a Division II record over 30 years later. The bar he set was incredibly high. I actually remember some folks complaining after a playoff win because Chris only managed 7 catches and a pair of touchdowns. Meanwhile, in the 1993 national title game against Todd Graham's East Central University defense out in Ada, Oklahoma, Chris was unstoppable as always, catching 13 passes for almost 200 yards and a couple scores. His numbers were so overwhelming, it really does take a comparison to something incredible to lend perspective to the absurd level of production he maintained his entire career. After the Ville, Chris had a cup of coffee with the Eagles, bounced around the CFL for a few years, and spent enough time with the Steelers to make one of the most incredible diving catches that didn't count from Cordell Stewart that you'll ever see. What Chris did or didn't do at the next level, though, hardly matters because the greatness he authored at Glenville in 4 years with Coach Rod forever established him as an unforgettable part of the game. But Chris George obviously isn't the only college football record breaker whose career you'll find Coach Rod's fingerprints all over. So let's pivot from what he's had players accomplish in the passing game to a couple notable careers his system has helped foster when running the football, in particular at the quarterback spot. College football began in 1869. About a decade later, the quarterback position was born, prompted by a need for a designated player to receive the ball from the center. Since that time, literally thousands of men have played the position at the major college level, including an assortment of elite runners, from Vince Young and Tim Tebow to Lamar Jackson and Tommy Frazier. But among them all, 2 stand near the top, Shoelace and Chief. That almost sounds like a buddy cop flick from the 70s. As much as I'd love to grab a tub of popcorn and watch those 2 run down a mafia hitman, which I don't think would take very long, it's not actually a movie. Instead, they were 2 of the most exciting playmakers of the 2000s. Players so dynamic that their antics penetrated pop culture.
University of Michigan quarterback Denard Robinson, who runs a 10.4 100 meters, is known for never tying these. Kate.
What are his shoes?
Yeah, that's right.
Michigan's Denard Xavier Robinson and West Virginia's Patrick Christian White. One famously didn't tie his shoes. The other, the son of an Alabama fire chief, consistently shook defenders out of theirs. Pat White was the perfect fit for Rich's quarterback run game. Watching him run Coach Rod's zone read was like listening to Leonard Bernstein conduct the New York Philharmonic, if the cellist was a 5-technique edge defender. Pat was dynamic, an electrifying difference maker remembered by fans as a playmaker of the highest order. But unparalleled consistency was also central to his success. Consider this. Pat finished his career in Morgantown with 684 rush attempts. That's the 4th most in WVU history, regardless of position. That's what makes the 6.5 yards per carry he averaged for the duration of his career so remarkable. That's staying power. Imagine keeping up that torrid pace, picking up 6.5 yards every time you run the football for the balance of nearly 700 career carries. Only 2 Mountaineers with a minimum of just 100 rush attempts have managed a higher average yards per carry over their career than Pat's 6.5. Tavon Austin at 9.1 yards per carry, but he did it on just 110 career attempts, and Jaheim White, the only active player ahead of Pat from a yards per carry average standpoint, has so far managed a 6.6 yard average on his 257 career rushes at West Virginia. In 47 games as a Mountaineer, Pat White ran for 100 yards or more 18 times. When the dust settled on his West Virginia career, he'd amassed an unprecedented 4,480 rushing yards, more than any college quarterback to ever step on the field. Just how many yards is 4,480 on the ground for a quarterback? A frame of reference, chew on this. It's more yards than Michael Vick of Virginia Tech, Cordell Stewart of Colorado, and Tony Rice of Notre Dame ran for in their college careers combined. And in case you're wondering, Pat did this on 200 fewer carries than the collective total of those 3 quarterbacks. Unfortunately, Pat's record didn't last long. Or did it? At Michigan, the centerpiece of Coach Rod's Wolverine offense was speed merchant Denard Robinson. As the tip of the spear in Rich's system in 2010, Robinson ran for over 1,700 yards, 1,702 to be exact, the most ever in a single season by a college quarterback to that point. The total also made Robinson the first quarterback in history to lead the Big Ten in rushing and set him on course to 2 years later, in 2012, eclipse Pat White's career rushing record for quarterbacks. But that's where the controversy kicks in. Denard bested Pat's record by just 15 yards. The problem? Some of Denard's rushing yards weren't gained from the quarterback position. In his final home game at Michigan, Robinson actually started at running back and spent most of the contest there, rushing for 98 yards against Iowa. He logged additional snaps at running back in the Wolverines' next 2 games to end his career. So how could he legitimately be considered the quarterback rushing king if Pat White actually had more rush yards from the quarterback position itself? Mike Montoro, West Virginia football's communications director extraordinaire, tried to make the case for Pat to remain the game's top rushing QB, but the argument fell on deaf ears, as things so often do with the NCAA. Just 3 years later, in 2015, when Navy quarterback Keenan Lewis finished his career with over 4,600 rush yards to establish a new record for quarterbacks, it proved to be a moot point anyway.
This is all a moot point.
A moot point?
Yeah. It's like a cow's opinion. Doesn't matter. It's moot.
Either way, in addition to being dual sport athletes who grew up in the South, Pat White and Denard Robinson share at least 2 more things in common. They both entrenched themselves among the most lethal and productive runners to ever play the quarterback position at the college level, and they both did so with the most effective parts of their careers spent with the keys to Coach Rod's version of the spread firmly in their hand. Beyond featuring a long list of All-American and All-Conference selections along the offensive line, from Glenville State's Sean Robinson, we called him Biggin, and WVU's Dan Moses to Michigan's David Malk and Jack State's Clay Webb, Coach Rod's offense has produced more than its share of conference offensive players of the year. If you consider both his time as a head coach and an OC, Rich has now installed this system and called plays in it in 31 different seasons. Remarkably, in a third of those seasons, the offense has helped produce a conference player of the year. That list of 10 seasons includes 8 different players at 5 different schools in 5 different conferences playing 3 different positions: quarterback, running back, wide receiver. 7 of the 8 guys on this list went on to spend time in the NFL. Former Mountaineer quarterback Scott Otis, Jake the Snake Kelchner's roommate in Morgantown in 1993 before Scott transferred to Glenville State, parlayed his success in Rich's system into a spot on the Baltimore Ravens' first ever roster in 1996. I remember Scott's signing bonus as an undrafted rookie free agent that year was a cool $1,000. Boy, have times changed. Sean King, who in Rich's offense at Tulane became the first quarterback in college football history to throw for 300 yards and run for 100 in the same game, was selected in the second round by Tampa Bay, where he stepped in as a rookie and helped lead the Bucs to an NFC Championship game appearance. You might remember the controversial Burt Emanuel overturned catch on the Bucs' final drive against the Rams. Well, if you do, that pass came from Sean King.
They review it and say no catch.
By the way, if you're keeping track, the only dude included here on Rich's list of Offensive Players of the Year who didn't at least have a cup of coffee in the NFL was some short, slow-footed quarterback from Tucker County. Imagine being that guy.
I'm guilty as charged.
Not included on this list is Jack State quarterback Tyler Huff, who last season skipped right past Conference USA Offensive Player of the Year to take it up a notch with league MVP honors. This also doesn't include the guys in Rich's system who had incredible seasons and nearly won Offensive Player of the Year, but for various reasons were edged out. My top two in that category, the aforementioned Sean King of Tulane, who in Rich's system in 1998 led the Green Wave to an undefeated season by hitting on 68% of his throws, tossing 36 touchdowns against just 6 interceptions to establish a new NCAA single-season passer efficiency record, and running for over 500 yards and another 10 scores. You heard me right. That performance wasn't enough to win Player of the Year. Instead, the honor in Conference USA that year went to Louisville quarterback Chris Redman, who finished the season with 29 touchdowns and 15 picks for a 7-5 Cardinals team. Oh, and one more thing. Tulane beat Louisville head-to-head, as King accounted for 3 touchdowns and Redman just 1.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
And in 2012, Coach Rod's feature back at Arizona, Kadeem Carey, failed to capture Pac-12 Player of the Year honors despite leading the nation in rushing with over 1,900 yards and scoring 24 touchdowns to help the Wildcats double their win total from the previous season. Want to guess who edged Kadeem Carey out for the award that year? Oh, Mountaineer fans, you're not going to like this. Southern Cal wide receiver Marquise Lee. That's right, names sound familiar? For a reason. The same dude that stole WVU Hall of Famer Stedman Bailey's Bolitnikoff Award in 2012 when Steady B hauled in 25 touchdown catches. But when it comes to Rich's system and Player of the Year awards, the craziest fact of them all might be this one.
There was a graphic one time that every quarterback I've had for at least 2 years as a starter has been Player of the Year in their league. So if that's the goal, quarterbacks, you're here. You can't just be a starter. Dang it, you got to be an all-conference guy.
You heard that right. In 30-plus years of running this offense, every single quarterback who has started multiple years for Rich has been named Conference Player of the Year in whatever league they were in. So, all a quarterback has to do to reach that honorific pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is win the job, then keep it for at least a couple of years. Pretty simple, right? And speaking of pots of gold, here's a fun little nugget. During his 7-year tenure at West Virginia in the early to mid-2000s, Rich's offenses outrushed their opponents 79% of the time. Why did that matter? Because when the Mountaineers under Coach Rod ran for more yards than the opposition, they won 82% of the time. After a slow start in the 2001 season, in which 7 of the Mountaineers' 11 opponents ran for more yards than they did, West Virginia picked up the pace, outrushing opponents 85% of the time in Rich's last 6 seasons in Morgantown. When things really got humming from 2005 to 2007, during the Steve Slayton era, WVU was bolstered even more in this category by a Jeff Castile defense that finished in the top 20 nationally against the run 3 straight years. The result during those 3 years was West Virginia outrushing its opponents a preposterous 92% of the time and posting a 31-3 record when they did so. If you're wondering how much these trends might have changed with Rich's teams in recent years, the numbers posted by his Jack State squads the last couple seasons might provide an answer. In their 2 years as an FBS program under Rich, the Gamecocks outrushed the bad guys 81% of the time, and when they did so, they won 91% of those games. This includes an incredible 10-game stretch that Coach Rod's team went on to close out his time in Jacksonville, in which the Gamecocks outrushed all 10 opponents, outgaining them on the ground by more than 1,600 yards during that stretch, and in doing so, won 9 of those 10 games. We've covered a lot of numbers in this episode, but as we wind down, it's probably a good time to point out that we haven't mentioned the most critical one of all yet. Most folks will agree that very few numbers or stat categories more directly impact the outcome of football games than turnover margin. It doesn't matter how explosive you are or even how many points you can rack up. If you're sloppy with the football, it will catch up to you. Just how big is the effect turnover margin has on determining the winner of a game? The numbers vary a bit depending on the data set you look at, but all agree the team that finishes on the plus side in the turnover column will win the game the overwhelming majority of the time, with some studies suggesting that rate to be as high as 75%. And turnover margin is, of course, a stat not confined to just the offense. It matters just as much how opportunistic a defense is in terms of generating takeaways. But an effective offense often plays a role in that as well. Not only is a winning offense one that keeps the football out of harm's way and minimizes turnovers, but the approach it takes and the success it has within that approach can sometimes foster desperation within the other team's offense, rendering them more inclined to take ill-advised chances to keep pace. If an up-tempo offense jumps ahead by a couple scores and it's obvious they aren't going to ease off the gas anytime soon, the offensive play caller on the opposite sideline feels it. He recognizes how tough his situation is becoming, and he might just grow impulsive, suddenly more apt than normal at least, to roll the dice with his play selections to try and keep up.
Cajun forced to change the game plan early. Play action fake. Hollenbach steps up. The ball hit as he throws. A diving interception attempt. It is Mountaineer football. And the nightmare continues for Fridge.
See that time that Ralph Friedgen on the road down by 21 already.
This metric, maybe more than any other, is what held Neil Brown back at West Virginia. Over the arc of 6 seasons, Neil's teams netted a collective turnover margin of minus 23. Those numbers make it tough to consistently win in a competitive league like the Big 12, where the talent difference between teams is often razor thin. Each one of those possessions is crucial and it matters, and turnovers impact that. On the flip side, this was a critical part of Rich Rodriguez's success with the Mountaineers 2 decades ago, as his teams posted an overall turnover margin of plus 63 in his 7 seasons. You don't need to rewind there. You heard that right. Plus 6-3. After a sloppy start with the 2001 offense that turned the ball over 32 times in 11 games. That's the most turnovers lost per contest by a West Virginia team this century, by the way. Coach Rod's teams rebounded to go on an amazing run in this category. The Mountaineers were on the plus side of the turnover margin in each of the next 6 seasons, including 4 finishes of plus 12 or better. In fact, during those 6 seasons, the Mountaineers won the turnover margin 43 times in a game, while losing it only 19 times. The West Virginia offense was turnover-free no picks, no fumbles lost, in 27 of Rich's 86 games at the helm. And when you play that clean in those games, that's going to help your chances, and that's exactly how things unfolded. In those 27 games, the Mountaineers went 24-3. Now, in Rich's FBS career overall as a head coach, his teams have committed 0 turnovers in roughly a fourth of his games as a head coach, and his teams have won 84% of the time when that happens. Well, I think we've just about used up all the numbers, so I guess that means it's about time to put a pin in this one. Boy, this was a long one. I'm kind of half worn out here, but it probably feels like you've spent the last several minutes drinking from a statistical fire hose. So if that's the case, here's hoping that Dramamine you popped at the top of the show helped you take the edge off any analytics-induced motion sickness. We do hope you got a little something out of this 5-part docu-series on Coach Rod's spread offense. Can I call it that, a docu-series? Almost sounds a little too sophisticated for anything we do here. Anyway, if you missed any of the other installments to this series, be sure to check them out either here on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. You still have plenty of time to do so before camp starts to help make you the smartest member of your crew. And remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. You guys, all you got to do is ask and you respond. We got the best listeners and the best viewers out there. We're going to have plenty more WVU football chatter coming your way before practice gets started, and subscribing is a great way to stay on top of all our new content. Until then, remember to be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast for Wesley Euler, Owen Schmidt, the Runaway Beer Truck, and Skylar Callahan. Signing off for this 5-part extravaganza, I'm Jed Drenning. You've been in the gun.
The fun doesn't have to stop here.
Be sure to hit subscribe and never miss an episode.
Join us again next time.
Until then,
tell an ear to tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast.
This mission is over. It's over.